His mother always said that a good man opens his door. She said it at the kitchen table in Birmingham when the boys were young. She said it at church on Sunday mornings when the sermon turned to generosity. She said it so many times and in so many rooms that it stopped sounding like advice and started sounding like identity. It became who Marcus was before he even had the words for it. He was the one who showed up. He was the one who carried things without being asked. He was the one who, when his brother called on a Thursday evening in the spring of 2008 and said, "Man, I hate to even ask you this," did not let him finish the sentence before he said, "Come on. I got the guest room. You're my brother." That phone call lasted 11 minutes. The living arrangement lasted 11 years. And one Tuesday morning in January, Marcus walked to his front door, picked up the mail from the floor, opened a certified letter from the Fulton County Superior Court, and read a document informing him that a petition had been filed to legally claim ownership of his house, filed by his brother, the man sleeping in the next room. Marcus sat down on the floor of his own hallway and did not get up for a long time. This is that story, and I need you to stay with me all the way to the end, because the ending is not what you think it is, and the lesson inside it is one that no one in your family ever told you, even though they should have. Before we go any further into this story, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do that right now so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. We put everything we have into every single video on this channel, and this one is no different. To understand how a brother steals a house, you have to understand the house first, not the building, the meaning of it. Marcus Washington grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, in a neighborhood where ownership was not just an economic fact, it was a spiritual one. His grandmother, Miss Ida Mae, had worked as a domestic her entire adult life. She cleaned other people's floors. She washed other people's laundry. She raised other people's children in homes she was never allowed to sit down in comfortably. And in 1974, after decades of working and saving and going without, she signed her name to a deed. A 3-bedroom house on the east side of Birmingham, modest by any standard, enormous by every standard that mattered. She paid it off herself. Every single cent. No help, no shortcuts. Just decades of disciplined sacrifice poured into a single piece of paper with her name on it. Miss Ida Mae had a saying she repeated so often it became the soundtrack of that household. She said, "Land is the one thing they cannot take from you. Not if your name is on the paper." She said it at Sunday dinners. She said it at graduations. She said it when the boys were old enough to understand that the history of black property in America was not a comfortable story, and that what she had built with her own hands was rare and fragile and worth protecting with everything you had. Marcus heard that saying, and it became the engine of his life. He left Birmingham for Atlanta after college, got into logistics management, worked his way up steadily, and in 2005, at 33 years old, he bought his house. A 3-bedroom on the southwest side of Atlanta. Nothing extravagant, but his name was on the deed. His name was on the mailbox. Miss Ida Mae's dream had traveled one generation further down the line and landed in his hands, and he intended to honor every inch of it. Darnell heard the same saying at the same table. But Darnell was a different kind of person, and I want to be careful here, because this story is not about a monster. Monsters are easy. Monsters do not sit across from you at Thanksgiving and make you laugh so hard you spill your drink. Monsters do not call you when your relationship ends and stay on the phone until 2 in the morning just to make sure you are all right. Darnell was charming, funny, and capable of genuine warmth that you could feel in a room. He had real ideas that he described with an enthusiasm so contagious you wanted to invest before he finished the sentence. The problem was never the ideas. The problem was everything that came after. The discipline, the follow-through, the willingness to grind through the part that is not exciting. He could not hold a job past the first real difficulty. He could not hold a relationship past the first real conflict. He was 31 years old when he called Marcus in 2008. He had just lost his apartment. He had nowhere to go, and his big brother said, "Come on." 3 months was what Darnell asked for. The job lined up fell through before he even moved in. The next one lasted 6 weeks. The one after that never came. And Marcus, every single time he thought about sitting Darnell down and having the real conversation, looked at his brother, saw the little boy he had grown up with, heard his mother's voice somewhere in the silence, and said nothing. He paid the mortgage, he paid the utilities, he bought the groceries. He carried all of it because that was what he had always done, and because he believed, genuinely, that love was its own kind of protection. He believed the door he had opened was an act of grace that would come back to him someday. And Darnell, living in Marcus's guest room, eating Marcus's food, sleeping under Marcus's roof, was studying every inch of that arrangement with a patience and a calculation that Marcus could not have imagined, because it would not have occurred to him to imagine it. The first 2 years passed quietly enough, but by year 3, something had shifted in that house. Not loudly, not in any single moment, but over time, if you had been paying close attention, you would have noticed it. Darnell stopped saying, "your house," and started saying, "the house." He stopped saying, "your neighborhood," and started saying, "around here." He began making decisions about the property without asking. Furniture replaced, a color chosen for the back fence, the garage reorganized, and when Marcus noticed and asked, the explanation was always smooth and just convincing enough to close the conversation before it became a real argument. By year 5, Marcus had tried twice to raise the subject of money and contribution. The first time, Darnell deflected with a joke, and Marcus let it go, because Marcus hated conflict, and Darnell had always known that about him. The second time, Darnell got offended. He looked at his brother with a hurt so convincing that Marcus nearly apologized for bringing it up. "So you charging me now?" he said. "That's how we doing it." Marcus backed down. He did not want to be the man who reduced family to a transaction. And Darnell filed that information away the way a man files away a tool he knows he will need. What Marcus did not know, because it was happening in places he was not watching, was that around year 4, Darnell had begun to educate himself. Real estate law, property rights, the legal mechanisms that govern ownership in Georgia, and what it takes to challenge them. And somewhere in that reading, he found a doctrine that has existed in American law since the country's founding, that most people have never heard of, and that would become the foundation of everything that followed. Adverse possession is the legal principle that allows a person who has occupied someone else's land openly, continuously, and exclusively, without the true owner's permission, for a statutory number of years, to file a court claim for ownership of that land. It exists in all 50 states. Originally designed to resolve disputes over abandoned property and ensure land did not sit idle when someone was actively maintaining it. In Georgia, the standard statutory period runs to 20 years under general law, but there is a provision in Georgia Property Code that shifts the evidentiary weight significantly. If a claimant can demonstrate they have been paying property taxes on the land in question, that evidence carries substantial weight before a court. Not automatic, not guaranteed, but enough to change a judge's reading of a disputed record. And here is where Marcus's generosity became the blueprint for his own undoing. Marcus traveled for work, sometimes weeks at a time, and because he trusted his brother, he gave Darnell access to the practical machinery of that home, the mail, household bills, certain paperwork, out of love and simple practicality. He never thought about what a court might conclude from that access 11 years later. Darnell had. Beginning around year 4, Darnell started making strategic payments toward the property taxes on that house. Not all of them, not in any way that would raise a question, but enough to build a documented record tying his name to financial responsibility for that property. He kept every receipt, filed by year and category, the way someone prepares a legal exhibit. He photographed himself doing yard work and small repairs, and stored every image with precise dates. He used a post office box on certain official filings, so his presence would appear consistent in public records without drawing Marcus's attention. He was building a case inside a house that belonged to someone who loved him, someone who would never have believed it was possible. In year 9, Darnell hired a real estate attorney who specialized in adverse possession claims. He walked into her office with a folder of documentation representing years of quiet preparation. The attorney reviewed everything carefully. She told him the claim was close, but not yet airtight. 2 more years of clean, uninterrupted record, and they would file. Darnell thanked her, drove back across the city, walked through the front door of Marcus's house, sat down at Marcus's kitchen table, and waited. Across the street, a woman named Miss Carolyn had lived at that address for 31 years, 73 years old. She had watched Marcus move into that house in 2005 with her own eyes. She had watched him mow the lawn, host cookouts in summer, put lights up at Christmas, and stand on his porch in the evenings, the way a man stands on something that belongs to him and takes a breath to feel it. She had never warmed to Darnell. She had said nothing, because she believed it was not her business. She would soon discover it was. It was a Tuesday morning in January when everything came apart. Marcus was working from home when he heard the mail slot and walked to the foyer. 3 pieces of mail, a utility statement, a credit card offer, and a certified letter from the Fulton County Superior Court. He opened it, read the first paragraph, read it again. Then his legs stopped working, and he sat down on the floor. On the hardwood he had paid to have installed, in the hallway of the home he had owned for almost 15 years. The document informed him a petition for adverse possession had been filed against his property. The petitioner was Darnell Washington, his brother. Marcus said later that the first thing he felt was not anger. It was something closer to vertigo, the feeling of the floor moving beneath you when you believed it was solid. He sat there about 20 minutes. Then he stood up, walked down the hall, and knocked on the guest room door. Darnell opened it, still in his pajamas, mid-morning, in no hurry. Marcus held up the letter and said nothing, and Darnell looked at it, then at Marcus, and did not flinch, did not deny it. He said 7 words that Marcus would spend years trying to stop hearing. He said, "Man, you weren't doing anything with it anyway." Marcus left the house and did not return until he knew Darnell was not in it. He called attorney Patricia Coleman within the hour, a woman who had practiced property law in Atlanta for over 20 years. When he finished reading her the letter, she was quiet for a moment. Then she told him honestly what he needed to hear. This was a real legal mechanism. It had been used successfully in Georgia courts. She was not going to pretend it was not a threat, but it could be fought. Continuous mortgage records in his name? Yes. Utility records and insurance registered to him? Yes. Physical presence or extended absences where his brother managed the house and handled administrative matters? Both. Patricia Coleman took in the full picture. Then she said the 4 words Marcus would repeat for months afterward. This will not be easy. The difficulty was not that Marcus lacked ownership. He had the deed, mortgage payment records from a single account in his name, homeowner's insurance, neighbors who knew his face and his routines. The difficulty was that Darnell had spent nearly a decade building a parallel record, not fraudulent but selective, that could tell a different story to a judge who had never met this family. A judge who would only ask one question: who has been behaving like the owner of this property? Marcus spent the weeks that followed pulling every document tied to that house. Repair receipts, contractor invoices, mortgage servicer letters, utility histories. Every piece of paper that placed him as the person who owned and occupied that home. And then, two things happened that Darnell had not accounted for. The first was a woman named Renee, who had been in Marcus's life for 6 of those 11 years, who had photographs on her phone, time-stamped across a span of years, taken with no thought of legal proceedings, showing Marcus unmistakably living in that house as its owner. She said yes to helping without hesitation and delivered a folder of photographs and digital records that changed the shape of the case entirely. The second was Miss Carolyn. Patricia Coleman called her to the stand, and for 22 minutes, that 73-year-old woman dismantled years of Darnell's carefully prepared narrative with the simple, steady power of someone who had been watching the truth from a front porch the whole time. She remembered the morning in 2005 when Marcus arrived with a moving truck and unloaded it himself for 2 hours before anyone came to help. She remembered his birthday gathering in 2010, the music, the laughter, the quality of a man clearly home among his own people. She remembered specific conversations with Marcus over the fence, specific seasons, specific repairs. Her memory was not dramatic, it was precise, and precision in a courtroom is more powerful than drama every time. Combined with Renee's photographs, the mortgage history, and years of payments from a single account registered to Marcus, the judge had a picture no selective paperwork could obscure. The adverse possession petition was denied. The court found that Marcus had maintained continuous, documented ownership throughout the period, and that Darnell's presence had been with the implicit permission of the true owner. You cannot adversely possess a property you were invited into. Permission breaks the claim, and Marcus had given his brother permission the moment he said, "Come on." Marcus won. And I want to tell you what winning looked like, because this is not a movie, and winning comes with a receipt. He paid $42,000 in legal fees to keep the house he purchased with his own money, to defend himself against a claim filed by his own brother, to prove in court what should never have required proof. He took out a personal loan for the second half and spent 3 years paying it back. His blood pressure during the proceedings reached numbers his doctor called alarming. He lost weight. He could not sleep. There is a particular exhaustion that settles into a person who has had to fight for something that was already theirs, and Marcus carried it long after the ruling. Darnell was formally evicted within 30 days. He left without a word and never reached out again. Not a call, not a letter, not one word resembling an apology. Their mother was alive through all of it. She spent her remaining years watching her 2 sons exist in a silence so total it had its own gravity. She did not take sides, because she was their mother, and her love was the one thing in that entire story with no calculation inside it at all. She died without seeing it resolved. At her funeral, Marcus and Darnell stood on opposite sides of the grave. People who were there said the distance between them felt like something agreed upon. 2 men raised in the same rooms, carrying the same blood, standing over the woman who loved them both without condition, and unable to cross even that small stretch of ground. That is the real ending of this story. Not the courtroom, not the ruling. That graveside. That is what the betrayal cost. Marcus still owns the house. He and his wife Claudette are raising 2 children there now. He put a homestead exemption in place the week after the ruling, enrolled in title monitoring, and checks his property records personally every 6 months. And every year, on the anniversary of the morning he sat on that hallway floor with that letter, he calls Patricia Coleman. The call takes about 4 minutes. She tells him his name is still on the record. He is still protected. He thanks her and hangs up. He said it is the most important phone call of his year, the thing he does for himself that Miss Ida Mae would have recognized immediately. Because Miss Ida Mae always said, land is the one thing they cannot take from you, not if your name is on the paper. Marcus just needed 11 years and $42,000 to understand how much work it takes to keep your name there. There is a reason I chose this story. More black generational wealth is lost through informal family property arrangements than through almost any other single cause. Verbal agreements never written down. Deeds never updated after a death. Houses passed on love, and the assumption that love was documentation enough. It is not. The law does not ask how much you loved someone. It asks what is on the paper. Marcus said something I have not stopped thinking about since I first encountered this story. He said, "I don't regret letting him stay. I regret thinking that love was enough of a contract. It's not. Love without documentation is just a story you tell, and stories don't hold up in court. The court does not care about your story. It cares about your deed, your title insurance, your payment records, your name on the paper. If someone is living in your home without a written document defining what that means, this story is for you. A written agreement costs almost nothing. An hour with a property attorney costs a few $100s. Title monitoring costs under $50 a year in most counties. These are not cold acts. They are not distrust. They are love that goes all the way to the end. Paper is not the enemy of love. Paper is the protection of everything love builds. So before you close this video, ask yourself one question. Is what you are building, the home you own, the wealth you intend to leave your children, protected the way it deserves to be? Not just by love, by paper. Because love fades from the record when the people who felt it are gone. Paper stays. Your family deserves a future built on something that lasts. Drop a comment and tell me honestly, could you forgive Darnell? Not forget, not excuse, forgive. And if you were Marcus on that hallway floor with that letter in your hands, what would you have done in the next 5 minutes? I read every comment on this channel. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone in your family who needs to hear it. Not everyone who needs this story will find it on their own. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the time, because next week we have a story I have been holding for months, waiting until I could tell it the way it deserves. A woman discovered, 3 years after her husband's funeral, that he had secretly signed over their marital home to a family she never knew existed. Stay close. We will see you then.